What is the dumbest argument you've ever been in? I remember when I was about 13 my parents had an hour-long shouting match that ended with them almost getting divorced. The issue? Whether or not the nation of Iraq has a coastline. Edit. Whoa. I didn't expect this comment to get so much attention. And for all those wondering, it was my mother arguing that Iraq had a coastline, while my stepdad argued that it did not. This was back in 2004. And they are still quite happily married to this day. That incident is something they look back on and laugh about. And both of them admit it was really a pretty stupid thing to argue over. My brother's line for situations like this is a matter of research, not debate. I use that line a lot. My husband and I have this thing where we only say I love you on Saturdays. Every other day it's I love you. But only on Saturdays. I don't know how it started. But it's been going for 11 years now. We're both shift workers. So sometimes we have to stop and think what day it actually is. We had an argument recently over whether it was Saturday or not. I said it was Saturday. He said it was Friday. It was Monday. My wife and I once argued over whether or not I liked mustard on my hot dog. I was for me liking mustard. She was against me liking mustard. The argument lasted way longer than you could ever imagine it would. The amount of times I have been in arguments with people who think they know what I like better than I do is staggering. My husband argues with me all of the time about what I should or should not like. Like, rare is this temp? And you say you like rare. Yes. But after 25 years. You know what I like is very rare. And in fact that is how I order things. Stop overcooking my burgers and expecting me to like it. Or let me cook for myself. Or hot dogs with mustard is the classic. Putting sugar in tomato sauce is standard. I guess I'm supposed to then concede to public opinion and like those things? In high school, we had to watch a documentary on the restoration of the Statue of Liberty and how it was originally built by the creator in France. I learned it was made from copper and it was a very thin layer. That night a friend at the time went to another school and was younger, came over and we were chatting. I told him about the documentary. When I said he was made of copper, he flipped out and said it was cast iron. I just saw the documentary, an era before YouTube or Wikipedia, and he's correcting me on something he didn't even watch. He got so angry and stormed out. My friend and I argued for months whether a cup of noodles was a cup of soup or a cup of noodles. I argued noodles. She argued soup. As our argument mounted in intensity and ferocity, we ended up roping in the opinions of a dozen teachers and 3 grade levels before putting it up to a grade-wide vote. My friend argued with me that I cheated with her BF when she knew I never met him. This was before we had cell phones and internet wasn't widely used, so she knew I never talked to him in any way. She even used that as one of her arguing points why I would choose him over her. I'm an astrophysicist. Had a friend, not anymore, that I've known from high school, who worked at a shoe store at the time, try to correct me about me explaining special relativity. Not sure if it was the dumbest on his part or regular on my part. But either way the guy is borderline retarded and he tried to talk to a physicist about SR because he read a Wikipedia article. My shoe size. My parents always bought me shoes too large because my feet were constantly growing as a kid. Thing is, I stopped growing and stuck with too big shoes for years. My dad had it in his head that I was a size 12. We were going to buy shoes online for marching band. I selected size 11s. My dad frowned and asked why. I told him that's my size. My dad insisted that was not the case. We got in a shouting match about how long my feet were. It was entertaining. Someone telling me that the United States was not a republic, but a democracy. Easiest win of my life. As I had them recite the Pledge of Allegiance. When they got to the part where you say, and to the republic, for which it stands, I told them to repeat that last bit. And I watched it sink in that for 20+ years of their life. They never realized what they were saying or pledging. It surprises me to this day how many people think the US isn't a republic. Arguing with me about what my name is. This person has been calling me a name that isn't my name for 7 years. And now they don't believe me when I tell them what my name is. Funny thing is, my sister joined in on the argument. She was with the other person. I once got into an hour-and-a-half argument with this dude about the validity of science. Not whether a particular study was valid. Not whether a specific theory was dogshit. No. The validity of science as a whole. His claim was that if 50 years down the line a new study debunked something widely believed today, then all science should be approached as if it were bullshit. I tried explaining the differences between scientific theories and scientific laws, you know. The basics. And he just wouldn't have any of it. To this day I don't know if I was being trolled, but I'll never forget it either. I wondered aloud who had to change the light bulbs in the really big buildings at this industrial site we lived near. It's hard to explain, but they look impossible to reach safely. He snapped that that was the stupidest question he had ever heard and that there was no reason to wonder that. I snapped back that it was a perfectly valid concern. BC, what if there was a power surge? What if they all went out at once? Then what? He got super mad, and to this day I have no idea why. This is the same guy that argued with me when I used the phrase moot point that moot wasn't a word. I said it was. And that it was in that one Rick Springfield song, and he said that that was stupid and Rick Springfield made it up and I was stupid for believing it. He was a real piece of work. Probably still is. My father and I argued how a 4-stroke engine should cycle when we reassembled the lawnmower. The way he put it together, it was off by a stroke. Intake valve opened when the piston was coming up. I told him we need to just turn the camshaft by 90 degrees and put it back in. The whole thing is trivial since we even have a damn rap song that is titled The 4 Strokes of an Engine. Intake, compress, ignite, exhaust, and we argued for 10 minutes over this thing without looking it up somewhere. Whom is right? What makes it very dumb? I've been studying engineering for 5 years so far. 2 last years included this assembly of engines, and my father was a trucker and bike enthusiast, so we both know how these engines work. How to pronounce the name O'Galley. Out of our whole office, a whopping 10 people, only 2 of them didn't grow up in the area. One of them tried to argue it's pronounced O'Galley. The rest of us all shamed them, and the one who vaguely agreed with him that it's pronounced O'Galley. We've lived here our entire lives, we know how to say the name correctly, thank you. Also, I got to threaten them that I would call my friend who's a French teacher to settle the argument. Never thought I would have to do that. Started dating a lady. First time hanging out with both her and my friends. Had a conversation with her earlier in the day about how I had breakfast with my dad the day before. Talking to another friend later, and I mentioned that I had breakfast with my father the day before. She insists that I had said I had lunch with my father the day before, and demands that I acknowledge that I had misspoke either in this conversation or in the previous one, and apologize. This was the dumbest argument in a series of extremely stupid arguments, and I'm generally really easy to get along with. This lady wanted to fight about literally everything. It didn't last. It wasn't so much the subject matter, but more the context. I was at a pub quiz, and I fought way harder than I thought I should have to convince someone that the city of Strasbourg is in France, and not Germany. I can understand that someone not fully up to scratch with their geography would know this, of course, so I don't blame or judge them for it. But what made this a dumb argument was that this the angriest fight I've ever been in. The kind that almost led to fisticuffs. It damn well almost did. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about a relationship. It wasn't about anything people generally have angry fights over. It was a fight over where a King city is located in a stupid pub quiz. Eventually, the team backed the other person over me. I have never been so happy to lose a point at a pub quiz before or since. Had an argument about taste testing a concoction that my girlfriend made up, and she wouldn't tell me what was in it. While I like surprises as much as the next person, she knows I hate certain ingredients, and in the past has tried to sneak these ingredients into foods in some attempt to get me to just start liking them, I guess. I refused to try the mystery concoction until she told me what was in it, and she just couldn't understand why. I think we argued over this for the better part of an hour. Look, if you insist I'm going to like it, then why hide what's in it? My sister and I would fake argue sometimes growing up. Our older brother was watching us one day and he decided to go downstairs to take a shower. He told us not to argue while he was down there. For some reason, my sister and I thought it would be a good idea to stand at the top of the stairs shouting, "You stole my potato." I did not steal your potato. And back and forth until our brother came back up. I loved trolling my wife with unpopular opinions about Gilmore Girls. I love reminding her how Luke sucks and Logan is the best character on the show. And she reacts every single time. I genuinely hold those opinions, but don't really care. I just like watching her get worked up every single time. Some kid from my class asked what I wanted to be when I grow up. That was at 8th grade. I told him I wanted to be a child-free animator in Australia. He completely raged at me and was really ignorant. Bear in mind that was in Saudi Arabia. Every day he would say, "You'll regret living with terrorists." And another argument was the child-free one. He hit me with the usual "You'll change your mind" and garbunga. Glad I moved out of that shitty school. My dad's biological father died when he was 2. The man I consider my grandpa married my grandmother a couple years later and served as my dad's father. My girlfriend, who has pretty severe father issues, was arguing that it's not okay for my dad to call my grandpa dad since he is not biologically related. You would not believe how heated she got during this debate. We were in 6th grade taking an English test. My friend knocks her pencil case and all the pencils fall on the floor. BTW, she is sitting behind me. She collects them and continues to do JAR test. At the end I handed the test and went to my seat and started to pack my stuff and backpack. I noticed that one of her pencils fell in my backpack, so I handed to her. She then get mad at me cause apparently that was her lucky pencil and she didn't do the test right because she didn't have it. Now we are best friends and I know that she doesn't have a lucky pencil and that she is just making excuses. So we began to fight. We didn't talk to each other for 2 months because I stole her lucky pencil. She got an A+ on that test. BTW. Not necessarily an argument but more of a disagreement. I work at IKEA and a guy asked me where the trolleys were, so I just said they were upstairs, to the right and down a flight of stairs to the left. I could probably recite that phrase in my sleep, having been asked it so many times. This man then responded with, "No boss, I'm looking for the trolleys." Rather confused, I explained where they were again, assuring him the trolleys were there with clearer directions and he'd just find them after he's visited the showrooms since there's very little to buy up there. Again, for some reason this guy was thinking I must have said something else, and out of frustration I pointed him to one of the trolleys with baby seat we keep by the entrance. Still wondering what he thought I said. I once had a nice little debate with someone over whether or not ducks were birds. I said that ducks are birds. The other person said that ducks are not birds because they are ducks. That one lasted a while. And NBSP also had disagreements over the correct pronunciation of various Pokemon names. One example that comes to mind is Mawile. I argued that it was pronounced Marwile. She thought it was pronounced Marwil. So we looked up a clip from the TV show. And it turned out we were both wrong. It's Marwile. Don't even get me started on Arceus. We still can't agree on whether it's Arceus or Arceus. Then, friend of mine went on a rampage about why he looks better than me, why he's more successful, and how my women game is shit. And I, stupid as I were, complied and actually tried to explain why he was wrong. I feel the cringe every time I think of it. To be honest, I now think it was because of his lack of self-confidence. Since he wasn't popular in that he just tried to make himself feel better. I should have been a better friend then, though. Was in a pub with a few friends, and some random dude dropped an ear, and somehow figured I'm vegan. Well, people like him are the reason I usually avoid to mention it. He came up to me, insisted on starting a discussion about veganism, claiming by the end of it, I would be eating meat again. He listed some stupid arguments. I told him I was not convinced. Tried to keep on drinking beer with my friends. He followed me and wanted me to try to turn him into a vegan. I listed some of the arguments. He told me he's still not convinced. I was like, whatever. Wanted to, again, just drink beer with my friends. That dude followed me all night and expected me to try make him vegan. Doesn't matter what I said and all the reasons that for me are obviously good enough to be vegan. He'd be just like, no, that doesn't convince me. Therefore your argument and how you life is stupid. Didn't matter how often I told him that I honestly don't fking care. 5 minutes later he would come up to me again, I'm still not vegan. So veganism is stupid. All your arguments were stupid. Now give me a good reason to become vegan. At one point, I was literally yelling at him that I don't give a single flying FCK about what he eats and why. That it's in no way my responsibility to turn somebody vegan and in no way his business what I eat. Damn it. For that dude, I would have bought a whole ham just to shove it up his stupid, annoying ass. I spent 20 plus years in the suburbs of Long Island. My grandmother didn't want anyone parking cars in the driveway, so we parked in the street. I parked my car across the street. A super convenient spot that doesn't block any driveways. I don't mind parking in front of my grandmother's house. But this time, I would have had to parallel park and I wasn't feeling it that day. Anyway, I walk inside and she starts yelling about how I need to park in front of the house. She never gave a reason, but she did say that I was spoiled and entitled for defying her wishes. I guess she feels that because she owns the house. She owns the street too. Looking back at it, I don't know why I entertained this argument for as long as I did. I worked for a company that made signs. We had a customer ask for signs that were 7mm wide that were to go on a door. Our sign makers figured the order meant inches because 7mm is pretty small, so made them 7 inches. I got a phone call from the customer who went mad at me for making them the wrong size. So I put a reorder through for 7mm. Argued with the sign makers over it, but they eventually agreed to do it after I shown them the order in writing. I even had the customer put her complaint in writing, reiterating the size they wanted. 7mm signs went out and a day later I get the customer on the phone literally screaming at me. Cue the dumb argument. We ended up having an argument over how big a millimeter is. And obviously everyone in the office were laughing. But this customer just wouldn't accept it and said we must be using a non-standard ruler to measure. Ended up being escalating to the sales department manager who refused to issue a refund. Astronomer here. I still think of the guy sometimes who insisted relativity wasn't real because he didn't believe in it. Like, that was his entire argument. When I explained the astrophysical effects we see, and how the GPS satellite system would fail within a half hour if we didn't take relativity into account, he was still all but it doesn't make sense. He had also never actually studied physics. Close bracket. Like, at least conspiracy theorists get pretty creative. This guy was just dumb. I'll tell you about the only legal trouble I've ever been in. The fight that got me arrested. It started over whether we should return a box of crayons or not. And to this day I don't have any idea how it escalated to the point of the cops being called. But they were and I was the one taken in. When we were kids my brother and I got in a physical fight because he said I like mini wheats and I insisted I didn't. His argument was that I always sang the Mini Wheats song and I was deeply offended that he wasn't aware that it was just stuck in my head, but I hated the cereal. I actually did like the cereal. I'm not sure why I was arguing with him about it, but I remember how genuinely angry I was. Someone tried to fight with me over how to spell my name. Now, my name is in a lot of languages with slightly different spellings. I would have accepted any of those spellings. But this one was just not even close. It didn't make any logical sense. An analogous example is if my name was Thomas and someone was insisting it was spelled Tomash. And not just the name Thomas in general, but that me, on my birth certificate, was named Tomash. I swear to God. It went on for like an hour.